Jana Jana Kidonga, Kidonga Tanyana, Alota Alanyata, Antaparachana, Topata Rewana. Geller Ragia. Nigajaga, Mera Ye Picha, get a winter, Itai, Telimagana, pay where.
It has just rained in Rupa sub-county in Karamoja's Moroto district. The ground is soft and there's water to wash the soil for gold. For this group of young women and girls, it means a chance to join the gold mining business, an opportunity to provide for their families and to ultimately get themselves out of poverty. Karamoja is said to have more than 50 different minerals. Gold, limestone, and marble are among the minerals that are most frequently extracted. This industry has become one of the main sources of livelihood for people here. At this hard rock gold mine in Amudat district, Oscar tries his luck, 300 feet under the ground.
I'm doing this thing because I feel like at least it's a bit comfortable. I earn some little money. For survival though, it's very risky, but I feel like I shouldn't do for the rest of the life.
Most Karamajong make a living out of livestock herding or pastoralism. However, the recent decline in livestock numbers has forced large numbers of people to extract a living from small-scale mining. The experience of Lotte here embodies a rare success story at the Lolung gold mine in Moroto. For mines such as this one, the interaction between supplementary livelihoods and pastoralism comes clear. Environmental concerns may mean these opportunities are indeed problematic to pastoralism itself.
On the environment, I think basically what we know is that those pits are not backfilled where people mine from, and one of the effects that it has caused us, the loss of cattle. Sometimes maybe when people are herding, they fall into those pits and that is it.
We should be keen even for pastoral areas. I think it is important for us to look at the mining sector and it will impact on rangeland pastoralism.
You go to any area where mining is taking place, you see total destruction of the environment. You know, when you are mining these big stones, remember these stones are, some of them are under trees, under thickets of the bushes. But they destroy all those and the place is just left there. You go to Rupa where they are mining gold, you find dishes and dishes, open dishes, that normally even animals fall in. Even human beings at times, especially children, fall in as they try because they can't maneuver.
I remember one day we buried like three children. Some were there half. They died, was buried.
Amam nga takin torong akrang. Ite ba yepite kuya. E wadi chatolodi. Ngeke toacha, otubutukuye. Agalar ba janke tolu etu beteng kiri na kadang. Ikertang kiri na kitongulu apa nga tubartang kitolu apolo ngete iralua. Ito yang kitongulu chengulu ala kaungulu ngi meyana ngulu. Ay dikintere meyera ba dara ka mo. Ay na tubari anche ko ni meyanda nya kana na ite. Anamure kerta itu manor kitolu ko tin. Bate nyama moni. Ay dana ki ngapanya. Ane elimokini gogo ngako. Jongoro ba kitubun kitolu apolo ko ay ni reali kitani ni yang amur to ukuri akatani ba wa. Ya dauro mo e piter ko na renyi chekato.
As these problems and losses continue to grow and threaten the natural order of the ranges, a more deadly threat in the sector flourishes in the gold mines. Mercury.
One of them is that the communities don't realize that even the wounds that they have, that don't heal. are actually a sign of cancer. And this cancer is through the mercury.
I don't understand deeply about it. I don't know the effect. But I'm saying we are using.
Looking at its side effects in all angles. Because it's affecting the animals. Animals are dying because this very water. Remember they do at Sino. They wash within the river belts. And this is the very water that is consumed.
The issue of mercury is quite very significant and very critical to the livelihoods of mining communities, not only in Uganda but across the globe. But Uganda is one of those countries that has been identified as a country that uses a lot of mercury in gold extraction. We are partnering with the National Environment Authority to undertake a country mapping of mercury use in gold extraction. As far as Karamoja is concerned, areas of Moroto are a bit safer because gold is not really extracted using mercury. But areas of Nakapitipirit and areas of Amudat, we've discovered that is mercury use significantly, which, as we all know, has a serious impact on the livelihoods of mining communities. Not only the miners directly that interface with mercury, but also the communities that are eating the foods, they're consuming the water, which water is to a large extent contaminated with mercury.
No matter the methods, gold extraction needs large quantities of water. If there are no rains and no permanent water source nearby, the gold disappears and miners go hungry. There is agreement by stakeholders that there is indeed an influx of investors in Karamoja. By the end of 2018, 100 licenses had been issued by the Directorate of Geological Survey and Mines at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. But companies, especially Tororo Cement Limited, continue to pay very low amounts in wages to the artisanal miners. At the same time, it accumulates reserves to maintain leverage over communities. At its Moroto mine, a ton or 1,000 kilograms of limestone goes for as high as 3,000 Uganda shillings. This is the price of one newspaper or 2 kilograms of maize flour.
Mining is something which is a bit complex. I see the people that really do the mining are not benefiting as such.
20 years down the road, we cannot see anything tangible from the mining sector. Tororo is here, it has been mining for about 20 years now, but you go to Tororo, you will still find the very common man the way they found it. They are still as poor as they are.
That small tipper, that carries around 7 tons. We sell it at 120. Then again, when you take a calculation, you find that you don't get any profits.
First of all, there is little bargaining power here. The reason being, these mothers who do at Sino mining, they charge them how much a basin of just sand dug out of those pits. I think 5,000 or 8,000. It's around 8,000. These mothers have to go and struggle. First of all, sometimes they even exchange to buy this sand. They come with it. Remember, it's not easy to get gold out of that sand just like that. So we reached a level where one time when interacted with them, that for you to get mercury, just a small bottle, they exchange it with sex.
Sex for mercury, a dangerous combination. The mines are in every way a very risky place for women. They do so much for so little in a hazardous environment. Companies in Karamoja failed to respect the limited legal safeguards around land and minerals in Uganda. Uganda's legal framework remains vague and inadequate. It also fails to guarantee the rights and participation of local communities and authorities around issues of land rights and mineral rights.
We as a sub-county and probably as a district are not yet benefiting from the local revenue from this mining. Reason being, we are not aware of the mining companies that are doing the mining. Most of them have a prospecting license. They are still doing exploration. But of course, they are also doing the what? The mining.
The whole thing is because of speculation. People are getting, they know there is such a mineral like here, they get a license over it and they sit on it. And this has actually constrained potential investors because when they come, you have to go a series of brokers. Hima wanted to put a factory. Tororo has a license. Moroto Cement has a license. I think got a license there. But some of these companies are briefcase companies. They don't have the resources to put up a factory. You find people using different companies, use this one, and then you renew again, then you renew again. They keep paying little these fees that they are supposed to pay. They continue paying those fees to hold the license, speculating, waiting for someone who will come and ask for billions to pay them. First of all, the minerals don't belong to them. The land doesn't belong to them. Those surface rights, people are licensed everywhere. People are busy looking for minerals. The issue is, how is that managed? How is that process managed? How are people's rights protected? People's rights to land, surface rights, access rights, user rights, ownership rights. All of that, how are they protected and embedded in the law? Those rights must be protected at any point if they want to make use of that land. The law is very clear. As in some areas, people must be consulted.
The right to consultation has been violated in all processes related to acquisition of mineral rights in Karamoja. This licensing regime has become an ideal playground for speculators, enabling them to easily assert their interests, claiming communal property and acquiring private titles. In 2010, Peter Modoi, an assistant commissioner at the Office of the Prime Minister, baffled the region by acquiring private title of 500 acres of land in Karamoja's Napak district. This land at Kautako village was then transferred to the Uganda Investment Authority for the construction of an industrial park. Karamoja Development Forum in a 2015 report cited political influence peddling, manipulation of communities, and bribery in the acquisition. In 2012, Feronia and Pro Solutions Limited acquired an estimated 23,000 acres of mineral-rich communal land in Moruita in Nakapiripirit district. Each acre was sold for roughly 20,000 shillings each. Abuse of power, bribery, forgery of land board documents, threats and intimidation have been cited in this case. In 2014, Peter Lokwang, a Moroto businessman, acquired a private land title over about 60 square kilometers of land in Lopei, Napak. A speculative move targeting infrastructural projects and extractive activity in the region. We have found that fraud, manipulation, bribery and political complicity enabled this process. In 2018, Moroto Ateke Cement tried to access 443 acres of community land in Rupa and Katikekile sub-counties in Moroto, showing a private land title. The move was to avail land for a joint venture with Savannah Minerals Limited and Uganda Development Corporation. The community managed to prevent this access. Moroto Ateker Cement continues to hold this title deed. This forced the company to seek land elsewhere in December 2018, in what became another controversial acquisition on 221 acres of land in Nadunget sub-county in Moroto district. This case was enabled by elite brokerage, threats, and deception. According to a study carried out by the Center for Basic Research, political elite are acquiring private ownership of communal lands across 6 sub-counties between 2014 and 2018 in Kabong district. This is a massive land grab in progress. In 2016, a battle for rights over a granite rock in Nabilatuk district emerged between Welt Machinen, Nakapiripirit district local government, and the Chinese road and bridge construction. The High Court awarded Welt Machinen 23 billion in compensation.
That small pit actually summarizes the problems pastoralism and mineral extraction in Karamoja is potentially a threat. To define ownership over communal properties, over communal grazing areas, and whether it can be actually attributed to one individual or to a community, and the benefits go to either the individual or to the community. That's actually a summary of how aggressive different actors and predatory in this kind of sector.
Karamojong began mining right away from 1980. And from 1980 to date, although there is an influx of the so-called investors into the region, but locally in the 80s, it was the local people who were mining on their own. But after, I think, in the 90s is when there was an influx of investors.
Most of the land in Karamoja is owned and used communally, a practice consistent with mobile livestock keeping. For those seeking supplementary livelihoods in mining, have to face the entry of companies. Companies have the backing of government throughout the course of their activities.
The coming of an investor, it affected our activity because the time when they arrived around here, they started stopping the community from breaking around. Good enough, we had a memorandum of understanding. We also stood up and say, this is something we agreed upon. So we cannot stop breaking stones around there. To some extent also, they try to use the armed forces. But we say no. Those forces is to protect the people with their properties and we're basing on the law.
He's talking about Dao Mabo Limited. Dao Mabo acquired mining rights in 2014, setting up a factory in Kampala and in Moroto. It paid nothing in compensation to communities for land ownership rights and didn't meet its end of the bargain in an MOU. Through target advertising, it soon gained a high profile in the market, got capital from several Ugandan investors, and closed its operations in Moroto in 2017. Industry insiders claim this was an act of fraud. Dao Mabo products ended up in Kampala and Mombasa, where they are traded on international markets like Alibaba for substantial amounts of money. For example, this 10 cubic meter block of marble goes for up to $22,500. Like 3 other companies before it, Dao Mabo once entered with the support of the military. But its factory in Moroto is now deserted, lies in waste, with banks and local investors trying to get whatever they can recover from what's left.
It's been demonstrated internationally that mining and arms and security forces, are something that any serious economy needs to move away from.
There are some communities in Karamoja that have already benefited from having access to information and organizing themselves to benefit from extractive activities in the region.
The mining sector is one of those that could drastically change the outlook and the situation of the Karamojong, especially when you look at its relative poor ranking in terms of every human development indicator that is possible. Karamojong need to have their rights to extractives, which is their rights to royalties, their rights to surface compensation, their rights to a cleaner and a fairer environment. And this has not been the case in the last 20 years of mining activity in Karamoja.
Despite these challenges related to mining sector in Karamoja, community leaders, district officials, and people are still hopeful. They call upon responsible agencies for more awareness, regulation, and protection of land rights within their communal land tenure system.
If government, if sub-counties and district could also strengthen the bylaws from the sub-county, ordinance from the district, they should also strengthen those policies, so that we are able to educate our young children for future.
The communities in the entire Karamoja, entire region, have to be organized into groups. They have to organize themselves into groups so that they can be able, honestly, to engage with these investors legally.
We should start from the people themselves. We must strengthen local institutions. In the case of Karamoja, there are traditional institutions. There are clans who own these lands. There is no land which is free. And that's the misconception. Ugandans have sometimes when going through Karamoja, they look at it open areas and they think that nobody has been there. Some people have been displaced because of insecurity. Now after the disarmament process and peace returns, people are going back to their own lands.
As the children of Abura continue to dream, mining activity continues unhindered and unregulated. The costs continue to pile up and basic human rights continue to be violated. On these white blocks of marble destined for export, their quest for formal education and love of country is inscribed. Like a mother removes thorns in the feet of their child, will government plug the holes in the policy legislation and implementation to protect the future of these children? At Namalu Trading Center, Karamoja's main exit point for these minerals, it is a normal day. Dozens of trucks, maybe even 100, today will leave the region with limestone and marble, destined for factories and markets. Dust, for now, is the only thing that surely remains.
Welcome back, everyone. So we have two questions in the chat, and we'll start with one from Seth Opoku Menza. And he's asking us about, are foreigners involved in the illegal mining activities? And then his second question following up on that is, how is the government addressing the issue? And are there any alternative livelihood options for the local miners? So Lupa, if you could tell us more about who are the different actors involved in this predatory mining?
Yes, thank you for the questions. First of all, the actors who are involved, we could not put aside the local community or the pastoralists themselves, who are the artisanal miners, the local miners. And then those who are involved are international companies, of course, licensed to operate in Uganda. And and they are investing more on extractive sector. Then the other stakeholders include the government of Uganda, which is the Uganda Investment Authority, including the local government authorities. Thank you.
The second part of the question was about the alternative livelihoods. So for pastoralists that have reduced livestock numbers, as was said in the early part of the film, what other livelihood options are available in Karamoja?
Well, thank you. Pastoralism is a millennia decade of kind of a practice that is already sustainable in a way that in a story you saw one of the miners saying that he joined mining as an alternative after losing his livestock, and then later he had to return back to pastoralism. He had to buy again to restock himself and left the mining sector. So this is an indicator that there's nothing that can be an alternative to an original kind of production system that is sustainable enough to and very much in kind of responding to changing climate. So there could be other alternatives, but the whole issue is how sustainable could be the alternative to that food system.
So thank you, Lupa. So we have another question here from Rodrigo Mendez, and he's asking us, who is responsible for telling and educating people that mercury and other minerals are causing them health problems?
Well, the government sector, which is the extractive sector, is supposed to regulate the use of some of these these chemicals like mercury. But the local NGOs within the area are trying much their best to educate the local communities. Local groups within the community themselves are being educated, sensitized by the local NGOs within the area. But a lot of the education is coming from the departments of natural resources and environment within the local governments of those districts.
Thank you, Lupa. And I think a follow-up question on the issue of informing people about the mercury risks and dangers is the other issue of, can you tell us more about healthcare in the Karamoja region? Because in Uganda as a whole, the Karamoja region is not as wealthy as other areas. So there aren't as many options for healthcare. So can you tell us more about that?
Generally, the healthcare system in Uganda is a dead system, because one of the issues affecting the healthcare is corruption. Drugs that are supposed to be moved to the rural kind of health units are just swindled on their way to the rural sector. But what's most important for the health of the pastoralist is having his herd, that's his cattle, the livestock is available that enables him to sell and access better health services. In the whole of Karamoja, the health sector is as poor as an education system.
It's really a difficult situation with the health issues and the water, because that was an issue that came in with conflicts over the water source, like the mining companies that come in from these different international bodies, from these different private investors that are involved in the land grabbing. They're then looking to use the water resources that are available, and then that means that they're polluted for livestock use and for human consumption. Can you tell us more about this water conflict and anything that you've heard in terms of an update since 2018?
Yes, thank you. Karamoja sub-region is a semi-arid region, and meaning that water stress is a problem, and the available water sources could not be enough for both human beings and also the animals, and including now the companies themselves. But what's most important in this case is that how do we respect the available water resources for equal opportunity for the pastoralists themselves and for the extractive sector, not polluting them. what the conflict have increased is all about the use of the add metals like mercury that has kind of polluted the water sources, which has also endangered the health of the animals, including the pastoralists themselves. And so the conflicts are growing within the inability by the government to regulate the use of some of these metals like mercury, and also the inability of the local governments themselves to regulate the flow in of investors into the mining sector that come with the different agendas. So the water sources available could not be kind of enough for the animals. And if the animals were to access this water, the company takes charge, since these are already paid by the military, taking charge of the security of the companies. And yet the conflict within the area is managing within the community themselves. And the military is not concerned about the welfare of the miners or the local miners themselves, but takes control of what the mineral kind of companies want to extract and ensure the safety of the exit.
Wow, that's really a difficult situation. I'm really intrigued if you could give us more of an update. So in 2018, the film was made, and now in 2021, what kinds of changes have been made on the political scene? Because we could see in the film that there are definitely some local politicians which are involved with trying to advocate that the national government and those actors that are allowing for these licenses are being held more responsible. So can you tell us more about that, how that political situation has evolved in the last 3 years?
Well, thank you. One of the challenges Karamoja is facing that when the advocates rise up, they are being targeted by the military. And we have so far lost men or advocates that have been trying to safeguard and advocate for the mineral sector inclusiveness for the rural people. And they are being targeted because of their message to the community about demanding for their rights. So in most cases, this is kind of fragile for the advocates. Like some of us are in danger to talk about how the mineral sector is affecting the local communities because this is aided by the military. So from the start of 2018 up to now, there are simple or kind of local based developments coming into the region. For example, there is a plan to set up the factory for making marble stones for cement, and this factory is yet to finish up the land issues that are already being talked in the film. Then also there is already a company that has set up a factory to design and make certain tiles, but still the local resource is not employed in such companies. Though the services come close, but the local resource is not employed to work in that factory.
Can you also follow up more about the land rights that are happening here? So it was said, I mean, the issue of the communal land rights, which are common in the pastoral areas, and then the people who are coming in and making private land claims, like the example in the film about the 500 acres. So what is the government position on secure land rights for pastoralists?
Well, what I think the government has failed to understand one thing. The land that they see it vacant without any infrastructure development on it is said to be a free land or no man's land. But the government has failed to consider that grazing alone is a land use practice that first of all safeguards the landscape and also a climate resilient kind of practice for pastoralists. Because when mobility is exercised, pastoralists move from one area to one area. That meaning they make control, use, and ownership of that land, which is not embedded in the national policy. Though Uganda has a very beautiful policy and laws about land governance in the country, but that does not mean that they will not protect the land rights of the pastors. But what they have just done is to ignore the policy, ignore the law, but assume that as if the law is not existing. As agents or as advocates, we have to continue creating some kind of bridging the gap between the government and the local people themselves to understand the land rights, the ownership, and the control of these lands. The acquisition of over 500 hectares of land by investors means that a loss of, first of all, loss of a pastoralist land resource, loss of livestock itself, loss of property itself, but then also leaving women and children in a dilemma of whether they will have a future or they will not be able to survive in this country.
Thank you so much, Lupa. There's really so much more that we could discuss about this film, so many deep issues, from the gender issues, the exploitation, the vulnerability, the land grabbing, and how pastoralism is mixing in all of this. So it's really a deep issue. I wish we could talk about it more, but unfortunately we've come to the end of our session. So I need to thank you, Lupa, Pius, for your time with us. And I just want to make a quick announcement that this session is also in support of the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists, which Lupa is also on the organizing committee for Eastern Africa for that group. And I also want to make an announcement that there is an open call for films. So anyone out there in the audience, if you know of filmmakers who've made films that tackle some of these issues around pastoralism, we welcome you to submit them to the Perspectives on Pastoralism Film Festival for the second edition that will be coming out in 2022. So with that, we're at the end of our session, but I also want to remind the audience that we have another session coming up at 8:15 Eastern African time, focused on pastoralist livelihoods in Africa with guest speaker Dr. Saverio Kratley. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your conference today. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Mordecai Ogada. I'm a Kenyan wildlife ecologist and a conservation policy expert, and a speaker at this year's GLF conference on restoration of Africa's drylands. This conference is very timely, of course, as we all know, and the restoration of Africa's drylands is a very crucial topic at this time. One of the things that we all have to keep an eye on is that restoration is a very powerful word. It implies what happens after some kind of disaster. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we restoring it from and what are we restoring it to? Africa's drylands are crucial for biodiversity, human livelihoods, ecosystem services, etc., etc. And most of all, and most importantly, we must inform the global audience and keep them informed of the fact that Africa's drylands are also home to millions of African people. The fact that they're this important for biodiversity implies an equilibrium that has existed there for tens of thousands of years at least in several parts of Africa. So this must have been something going right. And I think restoration has to look closely at strengthening and restoring that wherever it has been lost. However, a lot of conservation practitioners see restoration in the light of fortress conservation, as in the removal of existing humans and human livelihoods from areas for the sake of biodiversity. This is a fallacy and something that grew out of the creation of national parks in the United States in the 19th century, which cannot be applied all over the world and cannot be applied in this time and place where we exist today. We have to look carefully at decisions like the recommendations on having 30% of the world under protected areas. We have to ask where people live and you imply protection. What is that protection from? In many parts of Africa, this manifests on the ground as protection of areas from its residents or its custodians or its owners. And this necessitates violence, necessitates displacement, and all sorts of violations of human rights that are unacceptable in the world as we know it today. So conservation must take into account all these things and must be practiced at much higher resolution. We must remove from conservation the primitive notion that something that worked in the United States can work in Africa, and something that works in Africa can be applied in Asia, etc., etc., etc. We as experts and practitioners have to take our place at the table, and we have to be honest with governments, with international organizations, with donors, and all the people involved to make sure that what we are putting in place is not only environmentally sustainable, but politically, humanly, and socially sustainable, so that we maintain equilibrium, because equilibrium is what lasts for millennia. Fortresses only last for very short periods of time. So I look forward to discussing these things further, and I look forward to a decade that will show the way and show a departure from what we've been doing in the past that has required so much violence, that has required so much in terms of financial input, and that has created crises in many parts of our world. But we need to do this for the good of everybody. The protection of biodiversity is not for its own sake. It's never for its own sake. It's for the good of everybody. And I look forward to talking to all the participants more about this. Thank you.